Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17th Shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Unlike traditional rereads styles, we won't be going through each book chapter by chapter, but instead looking at different themes and placement of the books within the wider Cosmere. This time around, we are changing up the format just a bit. Instead of 4 episodes, we will be doing 2. We're merging reactions and retrospectives with characters' relationships, which will have spoilers for this book and prior books in the series. And then we're tackling magic and Cosmere connections in a full spoiler episode. Today, we will be talking about Edgedancer. Joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm your writer.
David.
Hey, I'm Windrunner.
Joshua.
Hey, I go by Jofwu and various other things.
And I am Mish, or firstRainbowRose. This episode will have spoilers for Edgedancer, Words of Radiance, and Way of Kings. Who wants to start us off?
Lift is such an interesting character.
Yes.
In some instances, she's just a bit much. But then you get more of her and she's just super endearing. And it's like, Brandon, how did you do this? She's kind of annoying, but the more you see her, the more you love her.
Yeah. I remember when first reading her interlude, everybody was like, wow, this is something, all right. And then by the time you finish Edgedancer, you're like, okay, Lift is kind of a sweetheart and we love her, but maybe tone it down a little bit, just a little bit, dearie.
Mm-hmm. I started reading Stormlight after Words of Radiance was out, and somewhere online I saw someone comment that Lift was like a fan favorite character, and I remember like opening up Words of Radiance to her interlude and being like, "This is not what I expected." I didn't like totally dislike her, but she was a bit much, and so it was just really unexpected for me. I think that reading Edgedancer the first time warmed me on her a little bit more than where I was before. And it's interesting because now at this point, I'm going back and I really love most of what I'm reading in Edgedancer. Like there's very few times that she really bothers me. Most of the things that she does that are crazy, Lift stuff to me now is kind of endearing. So I really enjoyed the reread.
Mm-hmm. I'd say I have a similar experience where I didn't care for the interlude much. Like I enjoyed, here's information about Edgedancers, but that was kind of my main takeaway from it. But I found her to be really charming in this book, and I always enjoy how she can kind of she'll act like she doesn't have a motivation, or she'll act like she doesn't know why she's doing something that she's doing, but will kind of reveal like, I didn't just run off to Yada, like I came here for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
And no, I really enjoy her little Edgedancer themes that we get into in the book. I think it's a pretty fun read, and I think that generally speaking, when people read this and they're like, "Oh, I still really don't care for Lift," I'm like, man, that's hard for me to imagine going through this book and not like warming up to her at least a little bit. Yeah, not getting into true spoilers, but we do know she is meant to take a much larger role in future books in the second half of the Stormlight series, and it's always interesting to imagine what that will look like.
Yeah, like when we first learned that, like it's like that's an interesting choice. Wonder how that's gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but something you said, David, about like there's a mismatch between like what she's saying and what she's doing. Because I also noticed this on this reread, because it reminded me of things Brandon has said about writing the character Matt Cawthon in Wheel of Time, which he struggled with. And Brandon spoke about how like with Matt, like he says one thing, thinks another, but does a third thing. And Brandon struggled balancing those 3 things correctly. It feels like he's doing something similar with Lift, where it's like what she's saying isn't matching up with her actions and what like is going through her head. And like that interplay between those 3 things is very interesting.
I thought that the sort of this unreliable narrator thing was done really well in this book. I'm not sure what it is but it really does for me hit kind of all the right spots of like how I like that unreliable narrator thing to be done. I don't know, it keeps me guessing on what her true motives are, what she's really thinking. So I guess that's part of it, is that it keeps me intrigued and kind of trying to puzzle out what the truth is. But it plays really well with Wendell there too, right? As having this like straight man character there that's kind of with you as the reader, trying to make sense of what she's saying, who's honestly a little bit slower to pick up on it than you are as the reader. So I think that works well with her too.
One scene that, speaking of Wendell being kind of the straight man for the reader, one scene that sticks out in my mind is the scene where it's like, Mistress, are you concerned about the blood? I'm told it's perfectly normal. And as a reader, it's a moment of, oh, that's what she means when she keeps on talking about how she's not aging, but everything is changing. And you kind of get a glimpse into, oh, that's her real age versus what you saw in Words of Radiance, where it was a little bit more ambiguous what in the world she was meaning.
I could be wrong, but from Words of Radiance, I don't remember getting such a strong sense of like the trauma she has of her past.
Yeah, it was much more like it felt much more like a joking bit of like, yeah, I'm 10, I've just been 10 for 3 years. This is where we're digging into more of like, oh, no, she doesn't want to be aging, but she is, and she just
Isn't
got a very big clue that she's not a little girl anymore.
Yep.
No, I think that Wendell is a big reason though that she works as a character. Like they do have a really strong dynamic, and he is pretty funny in his own way, and he's got his own little character moments, like where he's afraid to go into the room to watch, to go like spy on Nail and what's going on, but he has his little moment of bravery. So I think it's really fun. I enjoy the two of them together, and just how rules followy Wendell is, when he's like, well, I can't tell you that I'm going to be a Shardblade, basically. And everyone, but he keeps accidentally almost spitting it out at various points.
You don't get to swing me around.
Don't hit me on people. It's like, what are you talking about, Wendell? Like, but yeah, their dynamic it feels so different from the other Radiance Bren relationships we get with like Kaladin and Syl and Shallan and Pattern, and to an extent, I was going to say Dalinar and the Stormfather, but he just got bonded. We don't know what their relationship is like. Because there is that disconnect between them of Lift isn't playing by the rules Wendell thinks she should be playing by, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and it's just funny.
Yeah.
Another thing that I enjoy about Lift are just her, like the little kind of like gag she'll do in her POV where, she's talking about how she doesn't see a lot of bodies in a copse of trees. That's how you say it? Copse?
Copse.
Yes,
copse. There you go. Copse of trees. Like, that always makes me laugh. I think she calls the Grand Indicium something different every single time that it's mentioned.
Yeah, because and actually in the text, she refers to it as a corpse of trees.
Yeah.
Rather than a copse. And it's like, oh, I love those little linguistic quirks. Because Lift does them a lot, and then Wayne does them a lot. But those are just fun things.
One thing I like about it is I can't always tell if she's being genuine or not. I can't tell if this is her being kind of joking to herself, or if she's just genuinely has something mixed up, and it's just I don't know. It's charming to me to that I can't tell always.
Yeah, that's part of the charm. It's is she doing a bit right now, or is she being serious? I don't know, but it's still fun.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's the Grand Indicium. At one point, is the Grand Indipshipium or something? You've heard
the Grand Indecision.
Oh yeah,
Indigestion, I think, is one.
Was there an indecency? I feel like that's a natural one to do.
There might have been.
Could be.
Yeah.
I liked her comments about being crass. She there's a point where Wendell talks about the words you need to say, and she's like, I don't talk about jiggers and things like that. And then she turns around and says a couple lines later that are where she uses the word bullocks or whatever, and Wendell's calls her out, and she's like, it's fine because I was being poetic. It's okay if you use it when you're making art. So that was.
Oh, isn't the little Hoyd cameo part too, where or she says she learned that from Hoyd? Yeah.
All white hair.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess before he started dyeing his hair.
I guess.
I mean, we've got the entire time frame of him being a world singer with Sigzil that is unaccounted for before he was the king's wit. So maybe it was during that time frame.
I kind of feel like I've imagined it to be at that time frame because we know they were in the area. You know, Sigzil was getting arrested in, I think, Babeth Arnhem for being a creep or whatever. But yeah, I think that's probably around the right time. I don't know if Sigzil had like to hang out in like Ulay for like 5 days waiting for Hoyd to get fully digested or whatever.
Although that then prompts you to wonder how old was Lift when she interacted with Hoyd, because she's only 13 now, and Hoyd has been the king's whip for how long? And
not that long.
Not that long.
Less than a year.
Okay. So what would you guys say was your favorite scene from the book?
Oh, favorite scene is definitely Arklow. Just being Eldritch monstrosity person made of bugs, because was not on my bingo card for that book. I just remember like doing the beta for this and reaching that scene and frantically messaging Eric about it and figuring like, it's Odyssean-Amian. You finally know what that weird line from Hoyd was and means. And just because no one else had the book yet.
That's a strong one. I always like the Lift Darkness hug. It's a very sweet moment. And so that's one that I'm pretty fond of.
I probably would go with Arklow too. The reveal, and it's just such a great horror scene. I do like their interactions prior to that, where they're sitting on the steps chatting, and he's talking about his weird philosophies, and Lift is kind of being her goofy self, and they're playing off each other. I really like those scenes as well.
I'd forgotten how like weirdly philosophical he was. Like even at the end, he's trying to like fit her. Like he wants her to answer questions so he can put her in his philosophy. And I'm like, oh, what are you up to day in, day out? Are you just sitting here thinking? But yeah, no, he's a fun character. And I'd forgotten that he said that he's like, oh, we're going to meet again, which is kind of a fun promise that I had forgotten about.
For me, the two scenes that really stand out are early in the book when she like releases the grain, and that entire scene with the captain of the guard, just because of how funny it is, I think, is why it stands out to me. And then at the end, the mom reclaiming the son is another one that kind of stands out to me. And I remember always enjoying, because, it's one of those where at the beginning of the book, it's kind of heartbreaking, and yet you get this sweet, tender moment there at the end that is a little bit more promising.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So other major character we should probably talk about is Nail, also known as Din, also known as Naku the Judge, which is my favorite herald name because it's fun to say.
It's probably the best one. The Makabaki people get to use all the K's in their herald names, and that's a little more fun.
Yeah. I mean, he is the entire reason why the book was written. Brandon has come out and said multiple times that between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, Nail was going to be in a different place, and he needed some way to show that change. So probably a good idea to discuss him and the change that he goes through.
Because like this is the end of his campaign to murder all of the proto-Radiants and sets them on a different path.
It's interesting because I almost like get more out of like what we learn about Szeth, I think. I think I would have like bought like a change of Nail off scene, of like, oh, I was trying to do this one thing, but now the desolation is here. Obviously, like something maybe changed, but it's I really like seeing Szeth's like where you left him off in Words of Radiance. It was very abrupt. So I think that it was I like getting to see these scenes with him and sort of his first introductions to these Skybreakers and what is his role, what does he think about them. I like the way that he is. We see him kind of outright disagreeing with Nail. It's just an interesting relationship that's set up there, that he's like willing to speak up against the Herald.
Yeah, or like digging a bit more into like the philosophy of law, which is the Skybreaker's whole thing.
Yeah, he definitely didn't seem to fit in very well with the other two acolytes in a way that I'd kind of forgotten, and that they're really, they're kind of mocking him at the end when they're flying off. They're like, you're not going to make it if you're not willing to come along. And he's kind of and he's helping lift as well. Like he definitely seems pretty comfortable putting his finger on the scale here, even though I assume he's aware that Nail would rather he didn't.
Yeah, like he's making choices for himself for the first time in a very long time.
The scene where
like if he had gone like Seth and his creepy black sword that we don't have a name for yet, probably would have been able to kill or at least severely injure Arklow, more so than the poor Skybreaker acolytes that just got straight up ganked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess potentially we could maybe we'll dig into that in the later ones.
In the next episode.
Yeah.
I do think Zeth's like the way that he doesn't kind of go along and attack Lift, or the way he helps her out, etc. It really highlights like how arbitrary Nail's like use of the law to justify what he's doing is. That it's totally like Zeth and Nail like have a completely different basis, and so Zeth just doesn't care. It just goes back to highlight like how like Nail is just his philosophy on what he's using the law for is wild, and you see that a couple times because you see it also when he attacks the little the little girl who like steals from the one stall, and he just straight up murders her right on the spot without hesitation.
Yeah,
and then whips out a form to fill out.
He's like, don't worry, I got papers.
Because like she was scared and assaulted him.
Yep.
Like, you're an immortal herald, Nail. You were not in any danger.
Yeah.
Dude, it's a principle of thing, Ian. Okay. Yeah. No, you definitely can see just how rigid he is. And I also always find it just incredibly amusing that like he's like, oh well, I follow the law, but that can include him going to the prince of the kingdom and getting the prince to specifically make a law that lets him do what he wants to do. And I'm like, there you go. Like that's what following the law is, Nail. Good job.
Yeah, it's like I've done the paperwork so that the law is what I want it to be. That's not circumventing anything.
No,
it's 100% okay.
Yeah, kind of highlights his love of the law as being definitely something that he's willing to finagle for whatever he's decided is important.
The law is what he says it is, which is that next level of Skybreaker oath, and it's like, I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself there, dude.
I definitely thought that Arklow was a fun addition to it as well. I know we touched on him a little bit earlier, but one of the things I enjoy about this novella in Dawnshard is it gives Brandon a chance to kind of do a little bit of world building and spots in the world that we don't get to go to a lot, and he can introduce things like the DC and Amiens, like the Sleepless, that are going to be really important, but just don't have a place in the main story at this point, or
like Tashik and Yada itself, like as like a center of information exchange.
I don't want to get too off topic, but I really love seeing Tashik and like just this whole like Makabaki culture in this kind of central / east Roshar, because we haven't seen a lot of it up to this point. We haven't seen any of it, have we? Up to
We've
this point in the books, other than Lost Interlude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, I really want more of it's the food, like the way they dress, everything about the culture is fun.
And the fact that they carved the city out of the ground using shard blades, like that's is such a unique world building thing that like you can't really do elsewhere.
I mean,
like, in the Cosmere, because like it's cool.
Isn't there a city in the earth, like on Earth, that is carved into the walls of a mountain, like a canyon?
Oh, like Petra. It's like that's I would because like the canyons already existed. They just carved into like they physically carved troughs into the earth. They made canyons. I'm like, that's impressive.
That is impressive. I didn't realize that they had
not to say Petra like was like is a really cool archaeological thing on our planet.
He was like meh on Petra. Like, not impressed.
but like the engineering of that to also like make sure it doesn't just fill with water and drown everyone. That's
the curious part. That's what I want to know how they did.
And like the interplay between that and like knowing about Sesamolek Star, which is like one of Dawn cities that's in troughs in the ground, but like that is super ancient and we don't know how that happened, but like it's 100 years old. Like it's modern engineering. So cool. Give us the answers, Brandon. How does it not fill with water or with crap?
Creativity. Engineers.
Lots of creativity. Yeah.
A lot of hand waving because I said so.
To go back, I guess, though, to what started that was talking about Arklow. First Dissian Amian we've seen. And I love his, like, I don't know, just the inclusion of him in the story to give a little bit of a bigger scope of what's going on in the rest of the series as well. Because there's this whole mysterious race of beings that apparently matter. We've got the blurbs on the backs of the books that we learn in this book is them because of the way that they talk about these other characters and the way that he names, Lift as one that the others aren't watching. So like just mysterious entities that are somehow important. And
because like we had known the blurbs on the back of the book were in universe, but we had no context for them until now.
I love that he adds that aspect, and just as a character, like he's creepy, he's fun, his philosophy, he's just a fun character. I would love to see more of.
He's got great like world hoppery vibes too, whether or not he actually has been anywhere else. Where he's talking about a place a people you'll never meet that I know, and a place you'll never go. And I also found it interesting, something that I hadn't noticed reading it the very first time that I think sets up well for future Sleepless stuff is him saying that he's just another refugee there, just like everyone else in the city.
I also like how this pays off, because I think it's a line in Words of Radiance actually, or maybe Bay of Kings, but it's one of the feast scenes, and it's Hoy talking to Dalinar. It's the Gimmeltish scene about like take up Pearson apart and reassembling him in different ways. And Hoyd like offhandedly references like Odyssean Amian, which like we had no context for what that was supposed to mean. It's like, okay, like one of the races of Amian, they're different from Axes, who's a Sia Amian somehow. And then we get this book. It's like, oh no, Odyssean Amians can literally break their bodies apart and reassemble them into a different body. Like, just massively recontextualizes that earlier scene, and like, we didn't know this could happen in the Cosmere, and like, because like listeners and humans they're both humanoid. They're kind of the same. This is just a completely alien race, and like. So cool.
There's lots of fun moments like that. I think when in Words of Radiance when we see the second Risen interlude and they've got Axes tied up on that island. Like they're kind of mixing him up with Adisi and Amy in there as well, and they're saying, "Oh well, his body can just come apart. Like there's nothing to it. It's just a soul. Like it's just a spirit in there," which makes a lot more sense in the context of the Sleepless who can just come apart. And I think this is that what kind of led to a whole bunch of retroactive and going forward people looking for little Kremlings in relevant scenes that might be someone watching a person doing something important. A lot of times they'll be described as strange, like a strange growth or a strange color. And scenes like when Hoyd in the end of Words of Radiance in his epilogue it seems like he's playing a song and talking to a Kremling, telling him a story, waiting for Yasa to show up and leading people to be asking questions like, "Oh, is this, is Hoyd picked out a Sleepless right here who's hanging out, spying on him?"
And like even in this book, Lift is constantly pointing out the weird Kremlings, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like once you're like different countries, like that's just completely normal." But in retrospect, it's like, no, that was probably Arklow watching her constantly. And it makes you wonder, like, how much of that, like, oh yeah, Kremlings are different wherever you go. Maybe that's just because like it's different Sleepless in the area, and all of their Hordlings look slightly different.
That's possible.
Going to some more minor characters, I liked a lot of the supporting cast. So like Hauka, the Stump, and Genna are all like fun characters. Like they're not ones we necessarily need to see again, but like they all feel very distinct from each other, and they all play off of Lift in very interesting ways.
I always thought Hauka was going to be a Radiant. I thought when she was asking for spares in the beginning, it felt like such a like, oh, I'm sure they're for reading.
Yep. No, I love the Stump, and I love the fact that it is a little bit of a misdirect, that you don't expect the Stump to be the one that is the Radiant. But on reread, it totally makes sense how you're like, how she calls people liars and stuff. It's like, okay, this all kind of, all the crumbs are there.
Yeah, it's like Lift realizing like, wait, I'm not the one healing him. Talking about Nick. It's like, oh, I don't remember if I had figured that out at the time because it's been many, many years. But like, I like that reveal. I think it's done very well.
Yeah.
I don't think that I had figured it out before the end when I read it the first time. And I forgot how feisty she is. Like she goes down and she clubs Nail when she's coming down from the roof, like definitely a fun character.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what her ideals are, like what path, like what her path was, like of I don't know, development that her sprint's kind of urging her on. I don't we got that, but maybe one day.
One other minor character that I thought that was a lot of fun is the captain of the guard.
Hauka.
Hauka, yes. I may have forgotten. Character names get mixed up in my brain.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, she was fun. I enjoyed her. I enjoyed her like finding a procedural way to tax that guy who had stolen the grain at the very least. At least trying to do a little something.
Yeah, it's like the implication of like you can't do this. You don't have any proof. It's like, yeah, if I had proof, I would just seize it all. Like just pay the fine. Yeah, see, like that's the kind of Skybreaker I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting because she's Azish, right? She's not. That was like an interesting little like Azish kind of cultural dominance thing that I was looking at, where she's like, oh yeah, well the Azish will like serve. They can get, they've got their empire that we know kind of exists, and so that is a way that they do actually probably project a little bit of control as their soldiers do go out and take these little posts up in various places.
Yeah, but if they're all as good as a guard as she is, then like it seems like a great thing.
Yeah, no, I think it probably is a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily bad at all. Yeah. She seems like a pretty solid person.
Another scene that is now sticking out in my mind is the scene where Lift is trying to get the people doing research to do her bidding, and she's like, no, I'm friends with the king, I promise, write to him. And just, it's great because of the fact that everybody assumes that she's lying and she's telling the truth, but in the very Lift fashion. It's a very good character moment of, no, tell her fat lips and the king. And
yeah, telling the truth in the sketchiest way possible.
Yes, thank you.
Oh yeah, no, it's very in character that she knows absolutely no one's name or title, and has very little way to like indicate that she is anybody at all.
And then like there's a message from Gox, and it's just like you can just feel the like, I'm so sorry for Lift, but like he's the emperor, he can't like stoop that low. It's like any damages she does will be paid by the imperial account. Just bill them, it'll be fine. It's like, because he knows.
Yeah.
Her.
Any other characters or thoughts anybody has that they want to share?
I did like the early scene of where like she was talking about how she was afraid like the viziers were going to eat her, and like how that gets interplayed throughout of like, oh, like she's not being literal there, even though like she tries to play it up to Wendell as if she is. And then it's like later on we see is like, oh, like she's not concerned about herself, like she's seeing it happen with Gox and not being a fan of that. And it's like, oh, that's like is a very like beautiful little through line that gets some of like the jokiness of Lift, but also like something deeper. And that's kind of Lift as a character. There's like this veneer of silliness, but genuineness within.
Yeah, and specifically using the silliness as kind of a cover to kind of hide from the truth.
Definitely, and it's in keeping with her overall theme of like not wanting to change, like not wanting stuff to progress, so much that we kind of see at a few different points where she's not wanting herself to be brought up as somebody who could like be in the court or learn to read or kind of change what her life circumstances are right now. And probably for some good reasons too. Like I'm sure it's not the most fun to be getting lessons in the Bronze Palace.
Any other thoughts anybody has to share?
I guess we talk a little bit more about Nail and just like his kind of conclusion there. In that I really liked that the way he was defeated was kind of like an emotional way, because he really is just this unstoppable force, and there wasn't going to be another way to get him to see what was really going on there. Like he is pretty like you were talking earlier, focused on what he thinks is going to be right and what he thinks will serve his goals to like whatever end. And it was interesting to see that this was how he was brought down, was by Lift being able to connect with him a little bit and being able to show him all around him really just that, he really can't be right now. The Voidbringers are returning.
And it is an outgrowth of like her swearing a new ideal, like I will listen to those who have been ignored, which like really gets foreshadowed in this book very well, of like the emphasis on listening, of like people asking her if she's listening. So like the growth of that was very good. But like there's a point of like she has to listen to everyone, not just the people she likes. Like she doesn't like darkness, but like it's part of her ideals. Like she can see like he's in pain, and so she helps. And that does help him. It's like how the third ideal of the Windrunners is like, I will protect even those I hate so long as it is right. It's like you'll listen to even people I hate as long as it's what is needed. I
really like that. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but to the way that the unreliable narrator works, I love that I can't tell when she figured out the words, because like when Wendell, calls her just to speak it to get the blade to defend herself, she like she says that she already you could tell that she already knows what they are. She just needed to kind of be ready to like hit that point, I guess. But
yeah, it's like
she
I've
knew what it
spoken
was.
them in my heart.
Well, I can't tell at what point along the way she got to sort of, I guess, knowing what the words are.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt like something that she was kind of like, oh yeah, well, I already got that figured out in that moment.
Mhm.
One thing that's actually on my mind is I was recently like rereading. Brandon wrote this essay titled "Outside" sometime in the last little while, and I was rereading that. And Brandon talks a lot about sort of, I guess, his own journey, feeling kind of different from people in his own ways, and like how he has a hard time connecting with people. And one of the reasons that he writes is he loves to sort of get in the minds of other people and understand other people and help his readers sort of go through the same process of connecting and understanding these different people and different characters, different ideas. And I found that really resonating a lot in this book with Lift and her whole theme of needing to listen, needing to kind of pay attention to other people. I felt like that theme came across really strongly, and so I enjoyed that as well from her.
That's cool. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like that's about the thoughts everybody has. So thank you for watching. You can find us at 17thshard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can leave a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube, and you can support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Peace.